It was the night before Christmas, 1959, and somewhere in Birmingham, a woman had been decapitated by design. Patrick was born in the city of Dublin, 1932. He had a strange childhood. A childhood not too dissimilar from others of his ilk. His mother kept him close and suffocated him emotionally. She was a very loving mother, and I'm sure her intentions were good, but young Patrick would be held too tightly. And in contrast to his overbearing mother, his father was on the very opposite side of the spectrum. Patrick's father would beat him, once so severely that he laid unconscious in the hospital for 3 days. He didn't do much better in school. He was a very small boy for his age and was very nervous and shy. Not too surprisingly, young Patrick had an IQ below average and didn't get along very well with his disciplinarian 1940s Irish teachers, although it has been said he was good at art and had a creative mind. As young Patrick became a teenager, his penis started getting hard when he looked at all the young females in his class. He was way too shy to approach any of them, and as he got older, he got more bitter and started drinking. He also started having cruel and brutal fantasies. At 17, he lost his precious virginity to a woman much older than him. He would later look back upon this woman as someone who had abused him and put a spell on him. He would blame this older widow for many of his problems later in life, and he blamed her for his hate towards girls younger than him. His nervous tension and hatred towards younger girls grew so much that he started having sexual fantasies about putting helpless young girls through a circular saw while masturbating. Young Patrick was now no longer a kid. He was an adult, and he started breaking into houses in the city of Dublin. He had been caught trespassing on 3 separate accounts. Once inside the house, he would loot for women's underwear. Patrick went on to spend 2 years in the Royal Army, but they reported no strange behavior from the young man. When he turned 26 years old, his mother would relocate him and his brothers and sisters to Warrington in England. Patrick was still living with his mother at this time and never had a steady relationship with a woman, but inside his head he lived his own sadistic life where he brutalized every woman he came into contact with. In the mid-50s he left the nest and moved to Birmingham. When he lived in Birmingham, he started another series of criminal activity. He became a peeping Tom. He would watch unaware women undress through their bedroom windows, and on one occasion he made his way into a woman's bedroom. The woman was woken up by the sound of the door creaking, and while Patrick walked towards her, hypnotized by her tits, she calmly explained to him that she was married and that he had to leave. Patrick respected this and walked out of her house, tent in his pants and cruelty on his mind. The woman locked her door and called police. In 1958 he was sentenced to 2 months in prison for assaulting a police officer. The monster inside of Patrick was waking up. It was December 23, 1959. The night before Christmas would wash over the city in a veil of celebration. On this night, 29-year-old Stephanie Byrne was standing in her bedroom combing her hair. She was wearing a red jumper and underskirts, and she had no idea that Patrick was standing on a chair watching her. But she wasn't going to undress any further, so Patrick stepped off his chair. He went to put the chair back in the corridor of the hostel, and Stephanie must have heard him because she opened her door and she asked him what he wanted, and he said he was looking for someone. Stephanie offered to go fetch the warden of the hostel, but Patrick wasn't having that. His sadistic fantasies had become too strong. Patrick shocked her with a kiss and proceeded to grab her waist and push her back into her room. Stephanie screamed in terror, and the two of them began a struggle that trashed nearly everything in the room. But Patrick eventually got a hold of Stephanie's neck and threw his weight over her while squeezing her throat. Stephanie fell backwards with Patrick on top of her and fractured her skull in the process. Patrick kept squeezing her throat tightly, and he was kissing her while he was choking her. After a little while, he jumped up and locked the door. He then took off all his clothes except for his shoes. Stephanie was already dying, and she was not conscious. Patrick's fantasy had always been to terrorize a woman, make her scream and cry. But he took advantage of the situation anyway. He was going to defile Stephanie as much as he could. He committed several sexual acts on Stephanie's corpse, as she was dead by now or had died during his degrading use of the cock that had haunted his mind for so many years. What sexual acts Patrick did to Stephanie has not been disclosed, but I assume he used every orifice he could get to. After a while he got tired of defiling Stephanie's corpse. He hadn't reached an orgasm yet, and he wanted to defile her more. He went to Stephanie's kitchen drawer and grabbed a table knife. He started carving off one of her breasts. When he had cut it off, he put it aside and started cutting and stabbing her chest and back with a knife. He then got an idea. He was going to eat her breast. He put sugar on it and attempted to eat it, but it must not have tasted too good, because he didn't eat much of it. He was now a necrophiliac and a cannibal. He had one more act in him though. He grabbed the knife and started sawing her head off. The sawing took him almost half an hour, and he was starting to get stressed out. Patrick would reach orgasm during the mutilation. He had defiled her enough now, and he placed her decapitated head on the bed and put the knife down beside it. Before he left Stephanie's room, he grabbed a piece of paper and wrote down, "This was the thing I thought would never come." He then left the note in the room and went outside. He never thought the day would come when he actually killed someone. He knew he might rape a woman, but never murder one. But he had. He had done more than just murder Stephanie. He had defiled her as much as he could. A Christmas gift only a sadist can appreciate.
Birmingham is a shocked city lying under the shadow of the most gruesome killing for many years. In the nationwide hunt for the maniac murderer, the people everywhere are asked to cooperate with the police. At the city police headquarters, Detective Chief Superintendent Horton gladly gave the press all the information he had.
Patrick now had a taste for murder. He exited Stephanie's room and grabbed a bra hanging in the hostel's garden and wrapped a rock inside of it. He then went looking for another woman to brutalize. This was going to be his night of madness, a storm before the calm. He made his way to the ironing room, and in there he saw 20-year-old Margaret Brown. He switched the lights off and flung the bra with a stone at her head. Margaret's thick hair managed to stop much of the impact, and she managed to scream her lungs out. Patrick got frightened when the young woman screamed and ran away as fast as he could. Margaret went to get police, and the police showed up. As they went through the hostel looking for the attacker, they opened the door to Stephanie Bart's room. Inside they found the scene Patrick had just left behind. Stephanie's degraded and mutilated body on the floor, and her head sitting on her bed. Patrick was back at his own lodging house now. He lived only 400 yards away from the hostel, and he was in panic. He started writing a suicide letter to his mother, where he explained that he had two personalities, and that the real him was a good person. He changed out of his bloodstained clothes, but remembered that Christmas was tomorrow. He knew his mother was a very religious woman, and that she took Christmas very seriously. He didn't want to hurt his mother in such a way, so he tore up the suicide note he had written and decided that he was going to live. He then went out to drink with his cousin, but he was so paranoid he couldn't even sleep alone. He had to sleep in the same room as his cousin. Then on the morning of Christmas Eve 1959, he took a train to Warrington, where his mother lived. Patrick stayed in Warrington and police conducted one of Britain's largest manhunts ever. They used bloodhounds and checked out over 40,000 people. After some time, police learned that Patrick hadn't returned to his lodging house since the night of December 23rd, but his cousin told them he had been out drinking with him that night. Police paid Patrick a visit in Warrington, and he told them he had found a new job. But police found something sketchy about the guy, so they called him in to the station on February 9, 1960. They grilled him for a while and he was very nervous during the investigation. Eventually the cops asked him if he had anything to say, and that's when he stated that he had something to do with what had happened at the hostel. He then went on to explain what he had done and told police he had wanted to kill every beautiful woman he had seen that night. But when Margaret screamed, he had gotten frightened. It only took 45 minutes for the jury to find Patrick Joseph Byrne guilty of murder, and he received a sentence of life imprisonment. Patrick sat in a jail cell for 33 years. Then in 1993, when Patrick was 61 years old, he was released. But his behavior was very concerning, so he was imprisoned again in 1999. As far as I know, he remains locked up, unless he died, of course. But that's where this Christmas story ends. It's a story about a sexual sadist and a tragic fate for a woman just getting ready for bed. It was, after all, the night before Christmas.